Good evening, everyone. Welcome in the Bali. My name is Jante Mosselman. I'm a program editor here, and I am very honored that tonight we will speak with Mikhail Shishkin. He is a prominent author of fiction and essays. His work has been recognized with multiple awards, including the Russian Booker, the National Bestseller Prize, the Big Book Prize, and most recently, the Italian Strega Prize. He is a long-standing and outspoken critic of the Putin regime, and his essays have been published in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, The Guardian, Le Monde, and really everywhere around the world, just like his books. And since 1995, I always have to struggle with numbers, he has lived and worked in Switzerland, and I'm really, really glad that he's here. There is a live stream tonight. That means that if you want to ask a question at the end of this program, please wait till I come towards you with the microphone. Otherwise, people at home can't hear you. And it's also always a bit of a warning to not say something that is very embarrassing. But you are a very intelligent audience, I can see that, so you will not do that. Before we're going to start, I'm going to announce Jaap Scholte, who is a Dutch writer whose work you have maybe read. And I've asked him to write a short introduction for this evening that is going to be in Dutch. I apologize, we're also going to read in Russian, but I think this multi-language narrative that we have going on tonight is something we should appreciate, and I hope you agree with me. So, I'm going to introduce Jaap. Jaap Scholte is a Dutch writer who wrote many novels that received critical acclaim. 2 of his novels were Book of the Year in the Netherlands, and he lives mainly in Budapest since 1993. And lately he has been very involved in the war in Ukraine. And he wrote a book about his experiences called 3 Bags of Women's Clothing, 2 Cakes, Kiev, and a Sniper. Across the border into Ukraine and beyond, the full title. Thank you, Jaap.
Dankjewel, Jante. Ik ben sinds 2003 in Budapest. Yeah, it's a great honor that you're here. I was reading your book the last few days, and it is very impressive. And thank you for writing it. The first part is in English. Is there anybody who is not speaking Dutch? Yeah? Do you have this translation? Okay, great. Altijd met bril heb ik wat moeite hoe ik het moet doen. America has chosen the path of war. With that decision, local politicians are actually deciding the fate of an entire country. The US has launched an all-out hybrid war against us. The US did not leave us any leeway while bringing down the much-needed and beneficial bilateral strategic dossier, putting the world before the nuclear threat. The United States is performing a balancing act above burning ground with the bravado of a dualist. It fatally balances on the brink of a direct clash between nuclear powers. The US is ready to rush into the abyss, dragging others with it. Russophobes are trying to cover up robbery with pseudo-legal arguments. The international financial system will my English is horrible, inevitable breakdown. The compiled explosive mixture of acts points to hostile radicalization of the consciousness of local elites. For many years, a strategic security safety net existed between our countries that saved Russia-US ties and ensured global stability. Nowadays, Washington has completely torn it apart. Dit is wat Ruslandse topdiplomaat in de Verenigde Staten, ambassadeur Anatoly Antonov, vorige week zei, nadat Biden dat pakket van 61 miljard had ondertekend. En het geeft ontzettend goed weer hoe Rusland handelt en ook spreekt. Intimidatie, leugens, omdraaiing van feiten, angst aanjagen en chantage. Newsweek, het weekblad, was zo stomzinnig, want het is nog veel meer. Ik heb het een beetje ingekort wat die Antonov allemaal zei. was zo stomzinnig deze newspeak breed over te nemen en Antonov alle ruimte te geven. De tekst zit slim in elkaar. In enkele zinnen een maximaal aantal leugens. Antonov opent met het dreigement van de nucleaire oorlog. Daarmee heb je direct de aandacht van de westerse lezer natuurlijk. Hij schuift vervolgens de schuld voor deze escalatie volledig in de schoenen van de Verenigde Staten. Hij zaait verdeeldheid tussen landen door de bewering dat Washington met haar agressieve Russofobie de hele wereld mee de afgrond zal insleuren. En hij zaait verdeeldheid tussen de verschillende lagen van de bevolking door de bewering dat de lokale, door roof gemotiveerde Amerikaanse elites hierachter zitten. En of de nucleaire oorlog nog niet genoeg is, het gehele financiële systeem zal ook in elkaar klappen dankzij de Verenigde Staten. Washington heeft met de hulp aan Oekraïne de wereld naar de rand van de afgrond gebracht. Zoveel is duidelijk. En het is natuurlijk de totale omkering van alles. Het universum waar dit vandaan komt, doet Shishkin in Mijn Rusland, Oorlog of Vrede onderbouwd, gedetailleerd en superieur uit de doeken. Het is een geweldig en tegelijkertijd totaal deprimerend boek dat een ieder lezen moet. De vraag in de ondertitel Oorlog of Vrede is retorisch, want na lezing van het boek is het duidelijk dat Rusland ons al lang en breed de oorlog verklaard heeft. Alleen wij willen dat liever niet weten. En ik kan me herinneren, ik ben de afgelopen 2 jaar heel veel in Oekraïne geweest. En in mei 2022 was ik de eerste keer naar Chernihiv geweest in het noorden, dicht bij de grens met Rusland. En ik kwam terug in Amsterdam dat ik echt gechoqueerd was hoe het leven hier totaal doorgaat. Dat iedereen met bootjes op het water zat en zich zat te bezatten en met muziek op. En die totale frivoliteit, terwijl er een oorlog eigenlijk vlakbij is. En een oorlog die, en daar ben ik helemaal met Shishkin eens, die ons al lang verklaard is. Alleen wij weigeren het te zien dat dat zo is. Shishkin schrijft: de wil om te overleven in het strafkamp dat Rusland heet, vergt bepaalde kwaliteiten van de mens. De structuur van zijn psyche verandert. De leugen is al generaties lang onze levenselixer. Volgens de geschreven wet moest je altijd de waarheid zeggen, maar de ongeschreven wet luidde: als je de waarheid vertelt, zijn alle gevolgen jouw eigen schuld. We krijgen de voorbeeldige opvoeding in de moeilijke kunst van het overleven. Het ene zeggen, het tweede denken, het derde doen. En dat is natuurlijk ook Poetin ten voeten uit. Ik heb nooit in dat spiegelpaleis van leugens geleefd. Ik heb nooit in de Sovjet-Unie gewoond. Maar doordat ik nu ruim 20 jaar in Oost-Europa woon, krijg ik wel iets mee van die naweeën van een autoritair systeem. Ik noem enkele negatieve aspecten. Angstige, gedweeën, makkelijk te intimideren mensen. Weinig onderling vertrouwen. Een hiërarchisch ingestelde samenleving, waarbij veel naar boven wordt geslijmd en naar beneden getrapt. Weinig eigen initiatief. Oeverloze speeches met grote holle woorden. Onachtzaamheid voor de natuur. Hufterigheid van overheidsdienaren. De overtuiging dat alleen je contacten je ergens kunnen brengen en niet jouw talent. Je hebt altijd een kruiwagen nodig om iets te bereiken. De corruptie is groot. Jouw connecties zijn je enige zekerheid en niet de wetten en overheidsdienaren. De service is vaak lachwekkend onvriendelijk. De bureaucratie gekmakend. De loketten op veel plekken nog steeds op navelhoogte. Zodat wanneer je wil spreken met de ambtenaar van dienst, je op je knieën moet gaan zitten of heel diep moet buigen. Er zijn ook goede kanten. Dat mensen erg trouw zijn wanneer je eenmaal het vertrouwen hebt. Dat er een fijn, venijnig gevoel voor humor bestaat. Dat er een cultuur is van elkaar cadeautjes geven om de relaties te oliën. En dat de metafoor en de literatuur welig tiert, wat ook dit boek weer aantoont. Voor een boek wat ik een tijd geleden schreef, Kameraad Baron, heb ik onderzoek gedaan naar de Gulag en het gevangenissysteem in Hongarije en Roemenië. En een van de dingen die ik herinner is dat ik heel snel ontdekte, want ik interviewde allemaal mensen en dat eigenlijk de martelmethodes identiek waren in die twee landen. En het bleek gewoon op academisch geleerd te worden hoe je mensen martelde. En eigenlijk alleen lokale vindingrijkheid had af en toe gaf dat verschillen. Maar dat was dus gewoon de Sovjet-methode van martelen, werd geleerd in alle satellietstaten. In Roemenië was dat systeem eigenlijk wel het verst doorgevoerd. Het idee van heropvoeding, van re-education. Daar was het zo, en dat was in 5 gevangenissen is dat ingevoerd, uitgedacht door een KGB-man. En daar was het eigenlijk wel de meest brute vorm van heropvoeding. Altijd de nieuwe gevangenen die werden naar de binnenplaats gebracht, naakt. En dan werden ze door de medegevangenen met metalen, ijzeren staven afgerost tot iedereen bloedend op de grond lag. En dat was eigenlijk gewoon de initiatie van maanden van martelen. En het hele idee was eigenlijk erop gebouwd dat de gevangenen moesten medegevangenen martelen. En het was heel moeilijk om mensen te vinden die daarover wilden spreken, want het waren juist vaak de mensen die deze heropvoeding door moesten maken, waren vaak juist intellectuelen, priesters, mensen met een die moeilijk te overtuigen waren van het systeem. Die moesten gewoon eerst helemaal kapot gemaakt worden om te kunnen worden, herboren te worden. Maar ik sprak 1 priester die dat programma had doorgemaakt. En die had er een boek over geschreven en dat had de titel. En dat vertelt eigenlijk alles, die titel. Als je nog leeft, moet je je bek houden. Want als je het overleefd hebt, dat betekent dat jij medegevangenen gemarteld hebt. En dat is eigenlijk de enige manier hoe je kan overleven. En mijn idee is eigenlijk, sinds ik dat onderzoek deed, dat het is ook een idee van Foucault, de Franse filosoof, dat eigenlijk door naar een gevangenissysteem te kijken, dat je een maatschappij kan begrijpen. Maar mijn idee is dat dit eigenlijk het meest wezenlijke van het Sovjet-systeem was. Het gaat erom iedereen te vernederen, iedereen kapot te maken en de nieuwe burger geboren laten worden en iedereen medeplichtig te maken aan het systeem. En dat is eigenlijk wat je nu in het huidige Rusland ook weer ziet. Shishkin heeft wel een aardige grap in zijn boek staan over uit de Sovjet-tijd dat fabrieksarbeiders worden bij elkaar geroepen in de fabriekshal. En wordt door de directeur gezegd, ja, morgen gaan we ons met z'n allen ophangen. En de mensen zijn zo gedwee dat dat ook gewoon gebeurt. En dan zegt hij, zijn er nog vragen? En dan een man steekt zijn vinger op. Ja, wat is je vraag? Ja, moeten we zelf een touw meebrengen of krijgen we het van de fabriek? En ik ben nu vaak in Oekraïne geweest en hoorde verhalen daar. En voor mij is het onbegrijpelijk hoe de Russische soldaten eigenlijk voortdurend zich als kanonnenvoer die oorlog laten invoeren. En gewoon doodgeschoten worden en dat er eigenlijk helemaal niks gebeurt. Maar een man met wie we heel veel contact hebben, Andrei, die vertelde dat zij ook in de bossen al een aantal keren mannen zien hangen. Dat zijn dan Russische soldaten die niet naar voren wilden gaan. En die worden door hun commandanten opgehangen. En daaronder worden mijnen gelegd, zodat ook niemand ze lossnijdt. Terug naar die oorlog. In 2013 heeft de chef de chef van de Russische generale staf, Valery Gerasimov, een heel invloedrijk artikel gepubliceerd met de titel De waarde van wetenschap bestaat in voorkennis. En hij filosofeert daarin over de chaostheorie en komt tot de slotsom dat in de moderne wereld de eigenlijke oorlogshandelingen slechts de eindfase vormen van de nieuwe hybride oorlog. Dus voordat die tanks het land inrollen, zijn er eindeloos veel andere fases. Het belangrijkste doel is het destabiliseren van de situatie, het stichten van chaos in de staat en samenleving van de vijand. Die doelen bereikt men door een brede inzet van desinformatie, van politieke, economische, humanitaire en andere niet-militaire middelen in combinatie met het protestpotentieel van de bevolking wordt ingezet. En daar is de KGB meester in. En dat is ook wat ze op academisch leren, is gewoon hoe je tegenstelling in een land kan uitbuiten. Dus arm tegen rijk, zwart tegen wit, moslim tegen christenen, platteland tegen de stad, jong tegen oud. Alles waar je maar verdeeldheid kan zaaien, daar doe je dat. En daar gooi je olie op het vuur. En dat is natuurlijk nu in de tijd van het internet fantastisch goed te doen. En je ziet ook dat eigenlijk alle democratieën... Het is natuurlijk krankzinnig dat we in Europa, waar we het zo goed hebben, in West-Europa, dat er zoveel rechtsextreme partijen zijn. Maar dat is natuurlijk, heeft ermee te maken met dat voortdurende gevoel geven van angst en haat. Mag ik nog door of ben ik al te lang? Heel kort. Corruptie van politici en journalisten, propaganda in de traditionele en sociale media, cyberaanvallen, desinformatie, trolling. Dit alles is de hybride oorlog van de Russische generale staf. En Europa zit er al middenin. Dit zijn trouwens de woorden van Shishkin, niet van mij. Het Westen was en is op deze oorlog totaal niet voorbereid. De democratieën hebben de provocatie van Moskou compleet onderschat. De strategie van de nieuwe oorlogsvoering bestaat bovenal uit intimidatie. Men wil politici, journalisten, diplomaten en militairen in het Westen angst aanjagen dat Rusland bereid is tot een militaire confrontatie met de NAVO en indien nodig tot een derde wereldoorlog. De militaire provocaties langs de oostgrens van de NAVO moeten de dreigende risicobereidheid van Rusland demonstreren. Het Kremlin weet dat de bereidheid om offers te brengen voor Donetsk laag uitvalt in westerse landen. Dit dreigen met de dood kan eindeloos doorgaan. De democratische landen zullen steeds weer inbinden en alles van Moskou moeten slikken. Nou, en dat, het boek van Shishkin, het laatste hoofdstuk, eindigt nog redelijk upbeat. Ik weet niet of dat van de uitgever moest, maar het hele beeld wat je krijgt is heel erg somber. De Canadese historicus Timothy Snyder bepleit het uiteenvallen van de Federatie Rusland. Hij geeft als voorbeeld hoe Engeland, Frankrijk, Nederland, België, al deze landen eigenlijk pas redelijke landen zijn geworden toen het imperium uit elkaar viel. Toen zij nederlagen te verdragen kregen en daardoor een zekere nederigheid. Ik denk dat hij gelijk heeft en dat dat moet gebeuren. Want Rusland exporteert eigenlijk alleen maar olie, gas, leugens en corruptie. Het is gewoon een maffialand. Dit zijn de woorden van Shishkin. De winnaar is niet wie sterker is, maar degene die tot het uiterste wil gaan. Dat is de ongeschreven regel van de Russische gevangenis. En nu wordt de hele mensheid hiertoe gedwongen. Het is de vraag of we dat willen tolereren of dat we daar iets tegen doen. Dank u wel.
Thank you very much, Jaap Scholte. Mr. Shishkin, please join me on stage. Thank you very much for being here. We're going to read something as well. And maybe before we do that, 2 small questions. You're going to read it in Russian, and I'm going to read it in English. And this is the text that you wrote after the murder of Navalny. And I was wondering, when exactly did you write it? Immediately after you heard of his... Yes?
Yes.
And you wanted to read it in Russian. And I was wondering, why is that important to you?
You see, my whole life, I had very solid, very firm ground under my feet. And that was Russian culture. That was Russian literature. That was my language. Now, Russian language, they stole it. It belongs now to the murderers, to the war criminals. And must fight for my language, because I think the Russian language doesn't belong to dictators and the war criminals. It belongs to the world culture. And that is why, for me, it's very important to speak in Russian. And that is why I'd like to read this short text in Russian, and you will translate it, yeah?
I will do.
So, thank you very much for coming. And we start. Свеча хоть немного освещала путинский мрак. Ее задули. В официальном сообщении он умер. Между умер и убили разница в целую страну. Моей страны больше нет. Россия, которая вот так уничтожает своих лучших сыновей, не может быть страной людей. На земле людей этому бандитскому режиму нет места. Этого государства, именующего себя Российской Федерацией и несущего смерть и зло всему миру и своему населению, просто не должно быть.
The candle that cast at least a little light in Vladimir Putin's darkness has been snuffed out. The official report claims Alexei Navalny died. Between he died and he has been murdered is a difference the size of Russia. My country no longer exists. A Russia so casually destroys its finest is not a country that you can live in. In a land you can live, in there is no space for this kind of criminal regime. The state that goes under the name of the Russian Federation, which visits death and malignancy on those who live in it, on the world at large, simply should not exist.
Навального не могли не убить. Диктатура подразумевает молчание народа и всеобщее ликование при любом слове вождя. Режим видел угрозу себе в человеке, которого он пытался заставить молчать, заключив в тюрьму более чем на 20 лет. Они пытались его отравить, не получилось. Вот теперь добили.
It had to murder Navalny. Dictatorship calls for sullen population and nationwide jubilation of the least word from its leader. The regime recognized the threat this man posed. It tried to silence him by sentencing him to more than 20 years in jail. It tried to poison him, but failed. So now it has finished the job.
В России официально нет смертной казни. Есть. Вот она. И это только начало. Той преступной власти все равно, кого убивать. Украинцев, свою молодежь, мобилизованную на мясные штурмы, политических заключенных. Красное колесо, о котором писал Солженицын, покатилось дальше.
Officially, there is no death penalty in Russia. Only, there is. Here is the proof, and this is only the beginning. The criminal regime cares not a fig for who it murders. Ukrainians, the young people mobilized for its meat grinder assaults, its political prisoners. The red wheel, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, thank you, wrote about is again on the move.
Сейчас, после 2 лет кровавой бойни в Украине, при полностью уничтоженной оппозиции в России, трудно себе представить, что еще несколько лет назад Навальный мог участвовать в президентской гонке, выступать на предвыборных митингах по всей стране. Каким он мог бы стать президентом? Не знаю. Может быть, прекрасным, может быть, никудышным. Это можно проверить только одним способом – свободными выборами, на которых он бы одержал победу. Но для свободных выборов нужны свободные граждане. Демократия начинается с человека, который ощутил себя гражданином. Демократия начинается с человеческого достоинства. Кем ощущает себя большинство населения России?
Today, after 2 years of slaughter in Ukraine, and with the opposition in Russia totally rooted, it seems scarcely credible that only a few years back Navalny could participate in the race for the presidency and be heard at election rallies throughout the land. What kind of president would he have been? I have no idea. He might have been brilliant, he might have been hopeless. The only way to find out would have been for him to win a free election. But for that, you need free citizens. Fundamental to democracy are voters, conscious of their duty as citizens. Democracy is founded on human self-respect. How much of that will we find among the majority of the Russian population?
Никогда не забуду, как после одного предвыборного собрания в провинциальном русском городе, после выступления Навального, к нему подошел кто-то и сказал: «Алексей, мне нравится, как и что вы говорите, мне вы нравитесь, но сначала станьте президентом, потом я за вас проголосую».
I remember how, after an election rally in a provincial Russian city at which Navalny spoke, someone came up to him and said, Alexei, I like the way you speak and what you say. I like you as a person. But first, become president. Then I will vote for you.
Все задаются вопросом, почему он вернулся в Россию? Наверняка зная, что его там посадят в тюрьму. Да, он знал. Он был борцом, он был бойцом. Он знал, что нужно идти до конца. Но это не было жертвой ради жертвы. Он не шел на заклание, он шел побеждать. Он верил, что победит, и заражал этой верой всех, и близких, и дальних. В России всегда те, кто свергали режим, были сначала его узниками. Так было и в революции 17 года, так было и с концом советской власти. Советский режим, казавшийся несокрушимым, пал под книгами бывшего зэка Солженицына. Тюремный опыт всегда плюс для российского политика. Прошедший тюрьму всегда ближе отечественной массе избирателей, всю жизнь которых пропитана тюремной культурой.
Everyone speculates as why he went back to Russia, when he must surely have known he would be thrown into prison. And of course he was. But he was a fighter, a soldier, and knew that this has to be seen through to the end. He was no self-sacrificial lamb going to the slaughter. Navalny intended to win. He believed he would, and converted people near and far to that belief. In Russia, those who have overthrown the regime have invariably previously been its prisoners. That was true of the revolution of 1917. It was also true of the end of the Soviet regime, which seemed so unassailable, but which collapsed to the accompaniment of the books of ex-convicts. Now you have to help me again.
Солженицын.
Thank you. I will practice this. To have experienced prison is always an advantage for a Russian politician. Someone familiar with imprisonment identifies better with the voting masses, whose life has been permeated by prison culture.
Политический расчет Навального оказался неправильным. Думаю, он был бы хорошим президентом для страны, только где взять ту Россию, в которой он мог бы стать президентом? Нет такой России. Алексей не знал по-настоящему той страны, которой посвятил свою жизнь. Он вырос и стал политиком уже после развала СССР. В тот недолгий исторический период, когда в Россию пришла свобода, началась общественная и политическая жизнь, появились партии, свободная пресса. Для него это и была его страна, где все возможно. Он был политиком западного типа, который знал, что нужно бороться за голоса избирателей, быть публичным, открытым, отвечать за свои слова.
Navalny misread the political situation. No Russia exists of which he could have become president. He did not truly know the land to which he devoted his life. He grew up and became a politician after the collapse of the USSR. During a brief period when freedom came to Russia, a period that saw social and political life emerging, and political parties and a free press appear. For him, that was his country, a place where anything was possible. His style was that of a Western politician who believes you have to fight for votes, to be in the public eye, to be transparent and take responsibility for what you say.
Русская политика делается совсем не так. Нужно бороться за власть не на выборах, которыми все равно можно манипулировать. За властью нужно идти туда, где реальная власть. Давно и метко сформулировано, что русская политическая борьба – схватка бульдогов под ковром. Навальный не мог и не хотел быть одним из этих бульдогов. Он верил в то, что народ России пойдет за ним. Это была очень наивная вера.
That is simply not the way in Russian politics, where you fight for power not in elections, which, after all, can be manipulated. Power has to be sought where real power lies. It has long and rightly been said that in Russia, the political contest is a fight between bulldogs under a carpet. Navalny could not and would not be one of those bulldogs. He believed that people in Russia would follow him, which was very naive.
Активная свободная политическая жизнь, в которую окунулся Алексей в 90-е, была только рябью на поверхности Русского океана или гигантского русского болота, кому какая метафора больше нравится. Он судил о людях по себе. Ему казалось, что если для него главная жизненная ценность – это права человека, его свобода, его достоинство, то и для других это тоже самое важное. Он верил, что людей можно переубедить, воодушевить, повести за собой. И за ним шли тысячи, десятки тысяч, прежде всего молодых, прекрасных девушек и юношей. Но страна шла в противоположном направлении.
He judged people by the standards he set for himself. He supposed that if, for him, what matters most in life was the rights and freedom and dignity of the individual, then that must be what mattered most to others too. He believed people could be persuaded, inspired, and led. And indeed, his followers, mainly young, wonderful men and women, numbered in tens of thousands. But Russia was moving in the opposite direction.
Мечта режима – возрождение СССР. Страной правят те, кто строил свою карьеру и жизнь в советском КГБ. Их мечта – возрождение страны и их молодости – осуществляется на наших глазах. В этой стране население послушно кладет голову на плаху, вздыхая, что царю видней. В этой стране нет места ни Навальному, ни молодым людям, которые хотят строить свою жизнь не в ГУЛАГе, а на свободе.
The regime's great aspiration is to resuscitate the USSR. Russia is ruled by people who made their careers and lived their lives within the Soviet KGB. Their dream of restoring the country of their youth is being realized before our eyes. It is a land where the population obediently lays its head on the executioner's block, citing that, of course, the Tsar knows best. It is a land where there is no place for a Navalny or for young people who want to live their lives not in the Gulag, but in freedom.
Если бы Алексей знал, что произойдет после его ареста, что оппозиция полностью проиграет, что режим начнет подлую войну против Украины, а большинство населения будет эту подлость поддерживать, сделал бы он этот шаг снова, вернулся бы в Россию, чтобы сесть в тюрьму и дать себя убить? Не знаю. Но мне кажется, что да. Потому что всегда были, есть и будут люди, для которых есть вещи, которые важнее жизни.
If Alexa had known what was to come after his arrest, that the opposition would lose hands down, that the regime would instigate a shameful war against Ukraine, with the majority of population supporting that ignominy, would he have taken the same decision, return to Russia to be imprisoned and allow himself to be murdered? I do not know the answer, but I think he would. There have always been, and now and ever will be, people who hold some things dearer to life, dearer than life itself.
Он нам всем помогал. Он своим существованием, своей готовностью не сдаваться, идти до конца, давал всем нам надежду. Теперь мы его надежда.
He has given support to all of us. By existing, by refusing to give in, by making that supreme sacrifice. He has given us all hope. We are now his hope.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this text also. It's really, a very touching text, especially also if you read it, I think. And there's something that I read it before and I didn't notice then and I noticed now, but you write that in Russia, former prisoners have been changing often the regime, also in 1917. And do you think Navalny knew this and gave him hope?
Of course he knew this. The problem, the greatest problem in Russia is that we are always going in circles, in this devil's circus, how to change the life there. He knew that we could introduce democracy to change Russia only with peaceful means. That was the most important thing for him. But we have seen that the opposition with peaceful means can do nothing. Remember, a couple of years ago, there was such huge wave against the regime, Lukashenko regime in Belarus. These were peaceful protests. But what could do peaceful protesters against state violence? Nothing. And it means that the protest will be one day more radicalized. It means that protesters will go to weapons. But this, our historical experience shows it's no way out, because the bloody civil war will not bring us to democracy. They will bring us to the next dictatorship. So it's impossible to fight against the regime with peaceful means, and it's impossible to fight the regime with weapons. Where is the way out of this devil's circle? This is the tragedy. This is a tragedy of Russian opposition, should we say, yeah? Because the majority of population, they are not aware of this problem at all. You see, we must understand that all these main Russian problems, questions like кто виноват, who is to be blamed, yeah? Что делать, what is to be done, the main eternal cursed Russian questions. These are the titles of the Russian novels of the 19th century. These were the questions of reading public. For 150 million of peasants who could not read, yeah, the main Russian questions was, is, and I'm afraid will be, is the Tsar real or fake? That is the main Russian question. Because if the Tsar is real, we will have order. If the Tsar is fake, false, we will have smuta, yeah, disorder, chaos, anarchy. And how can we understand that the Tsar is real? Just one possibility, the only one possibility. Only victorious Tsar is real. So only victory could prove the population that the Tsar is real. Look, Stalin, yeah, could kill millions and millions, but he had the great victory in the Second World War. Till now, he is a real Tsar. Now they erect new monuments to Stalin. Gorbachev, so beloved here in the West, he lost the Afghanian war, he lost the Cold War against the West. He was not a real Tsar, he was despised. Yeah? People hate him till now. And this is the only way to legitimize themselves for the Tsars. The only way, because all these elections, they don't legitimize anything. Yeah, you can falsify any elections. And so Yeltsin realized this, yeah, because in the 90s, yeah, it was just this attempt to introduce democracy in Russia failed. Yeah? And people, these 150 slaves who just became freedom, yeah, and they didn't know what to do with this freedom, yeah. For them it was just chaos and anarchy, and Yeltsin realized he needs to, not the elections, yeah, he will lose the elections, yeah, he needs a small victorious war. And his generals told him, we will take Grozny in 3 hours. The first, maybe you remember, maybe not, the first Chechenian war. Yeltsin lost this war, he was just, the Russian population hated him, yeah, hated him. It means the next Tsar, to get this legitimization, yeah, had to win the war. You remember how Putin came to the power. He started with the explosions of the buildings in Moscow. So from the very beginning, he was the war criminal against his own population. You remember the Second Chechenian War. It was not a war, it was genocide pur. And after that, of course, he was always in need to be the real Tsar. And you remember 2014, the annexation of Crimea. Russian population was absolutely happy. Krym nash, yeah, Crimea is ours, yeah. People were happy, we have a real Tsar now. What happened then? Yeah? His generals told him, we will take Kiev in 3 days. Had he known what would happen, he would never start this war, because all this blah blah about NATO extensions, blah blah blah, it was just, he needed a small victorious war. Yeah, he would never start this war. But as every dictator, he just lost the connections to reality. He got for years just the information he wanted to get, yeah? And he lost this war. Actually, there was no victory. And it's clear that he is not a real Tsar. You remember last year, Prigozhin appraisal. Everybody was waiting for this moment. Yeah, Prigozhin's tanks were 400 kilometers from Moscow, 300 kilometers, 200 kilometers. The new Tsar is coming. You remember in Rostov, yeah, people cheered his soldiers with flowers and ice cream.
Maybe for the people who don't know, he's the leader of the Wagner Group.
You know who Prigozhin was.
Yeah, just in case.
And nobody wanted to defend Putin because Putin was not a real Tsar. So Russia is ready for the new Tsar. The new Tsar is not ready for Russia, but just wait, yeah. It will come. It will come. So it's just... Okay, ask me something. I'm just talking and talking and
But
talking.
that's good.
Just interrupt me.
No, but what I particularly liked about your book is that every time that I have a question, you answer it in the next 10 pages. And I love that about
Maybe I should say, you don't ask me about this, but maybe I should say how I came to write this book.
You can?
You see, last, 20 years, I tried to read books about Russia, written by well-known, famous Western Russian experts, explaining to the Western readers and to Western politicians how to build bridges to Putin. Yeah? People didn't understand how Russia works, and thanks to these Russian experts, we are now in this catastrophe.
But let me ask you something about that, because there is a red line of that Western naivety in your book, and I was wondering about that because I understand very well that you wanted to write the book because of this, but I was wondering, did the West not see it? Did they turn a blind eye on it, or did they see it but just not do anything about it, also because of opportunity?
People want to believe what they want to believe. People were blind because they wanted to see what they wanted to see. People thought we will make negotiations with the devil. Mm-hmm. We will sell just a little bit of our soul, like Western politicians, yeah? You cannot sell a little small part of your soul to devil, yeah? You know what happened to the German Chancellor, for example, yeah?
Schröder.
And we will talk about it a little bit later. So it was naivety, of course, naivety, but for people who are in charge of this naivety, it was a crime. So for these experts, it was a crime, yeah, because people believed them. And so for me, it was very important to explain to the Western readers how Russia works. And so I wanted to explain the war, because this war started not in February 22. This war started after the Crimea annexation. Yeah? And so 2019, I wrote this book in German. Yeah, not in Russian, but in German, because I wanted to explain to my Western readers, for Russians, you don't have to write this book, because we are a civil war. And for people who are on my side of the front line, I don't need to explain anything, they understand everything. And people who are on the other front line, on the other side of the front line, they will never read my books because I'm a traitor. Yeah, anyway. And so I explained this war, I explained Russia through the Russian history in this book and through the personal family history. And the last chapters were dedicated to the future. And now everything is going after the script, unfortunately. Yeah? And after February 22, this book has been translated into, I don't know, in 20 languages. And actually, I'm asking why Dutch translation is so late, yeah, because it has been translated to almost all languages.
But do you
and I didn't change a word. I didn't change a word. Mm-hmm. I just wrote the introduction, the foreword, and the afterword. Yeah.
It's incredibly accurate. That's so scary about it, that you wrote this in 2019 and that people didn't listen. But I was wondering also while reading it, do you think that the West now does really see what Putin is capable of, or do you think we still have a blind eye?
Look, it's the question of their responsibility. Mm-hmm. Of course, the main responsibility have Russians, that they got this criminal dictatorship. But without the support from democratic countries, the establishing of this criminal regime, dictatorship in Russia would not be possible at all. I remember 90s, yeah? People in Russia were ready actually for changes. Because in the Soviet Union, yeah, they had no idea of democracy. They had no idea of what is a law state, how a law state works. Mm-hmm. But they saw American movies, and they were ready for democracy. Oh, we want democracy, we want McDonald's, we want American cars, we want free elections. Mm-hmm. It was everything included in the package. And in the 90s, the Western democracies had to help the new Russian democracy to be established. In which way? Not by writing the laws, by a lot of good laws, yeah? Not by sending money. They had to help just, they had to show how democracy works on their own example. Mm-hmm. It's so simple. Look, Russians, yeah? Here we have laws, and you live according to laws. And if you break the law, you go to prison. That's how a law state works. What did the Western democracies show to Russians? I worked as an interpreter for Swiss banks, for Swiss lawyers, for Russians who came with a huge amount of dirty money to open the account. Yeah. And it was not only in Switzerland, it was everywhere. It was in London, it was in the United States, it was in Holland. Yeah? So the Western democracies showed that if you have enough amount of dirty money, the law state doesn't exist. That's democracy. Without this support for the criminal regime in Russia, yeah, support through the lawyers, through the politicians, through the banks in the West, the establishing of this beast, of this monster in Russia wouldn't be possible. And that is why the Western democracies have also the responsibility for having made this mistake. And now they have the responsibility, they must correct this mistake to help Ukraine to kill the beast.
It's one of the most beautiful parts in the book, but also really heartbreaking, how you describe really that it goes from 1991 to 1993. And in 1991, you're really hopeful and you think there can actually be change. And then in 1993, that's all over. It's 2 years.
You see, it was another attempt to introduce democracy in Russia. Yeah? You must understand that it's just the part of the whole history. Yeah? Now we have the same social structure as we had at Stalin time, before revolution, 800 years ago when Russia was just part of Mongolian Empire. It's a pyramid of slaves, and here is the Khan or Tsar or president, and doesn't matter how you call him. And it's just about the only sense of this pyramid is the power, fighting for power, having the power. And all these people here, they are slaves. They don't have any right to say anything. They have no right to have private property, nothing. Yeah. And we have for 200 years, we have a civil war in Russia. Because when Peter the Great came to Holland, he was fascinated. Oh, beautiful houses, yeah, such a culture, yeah. He opened Russia. But he opened Russia not for the Western culture, yeah. He was at war. This pyramid was always at war with the whole world. But the slaves cannot produce anything. They cannot invent anything. So, and for the war against the Europe, Peter the Great, yeah, needed weapons. And so he needed the cannons, weapons from the West to fight the West. But with these cannons came people. Gastarbeiter. And it was the 18th century. And these people came from the Europe of the 18th century, bringing some strange words with them, égalité, liberté, fraternité. And it was just the matter of time when all these people, with all these strange words, yeah, will start to fight the state, because it doesn't matter how you call these people, intelligentsia, Russian Europeans, it doesn't matter. But we have actually, since the 18th century, two different nations who share the same territory, who speak the same language. They call themselves Russians, but mentally they are absolutely different. Yeah, the majority of populations, yeah, feels themselves like on the holy island, surrounded by the ocean of enemies. These enemies, they want to destroy us, and we must just fight to defend our holy mother country, and only the Tsar and Kremlin is our father, our general, yeah, only he could save us. And the other Russian nation, yeah, they hate this dictatorship. They want to live like in Switzerland. Yeah, they want to have the laws, they want to introduce democracy. And so this war, the civil war, yeah, ended twice with our victory. The first victory was in February 1917. We came to power and declared Russia as a republic. And it was actually the most free state in the world. Russian women got such freedom, such rights, which women in Switzerland, yeah, could get only 70 years after that. But it was a law state for us, but for millions and millions of peasants, yeah, who don't understand how democracy works. It was chaos, it was anarchy. And Russian history misused Marxists, Bolsheviks, to establish the order. Yeah? And Stalin, when the new Russian Empire was established, first of all, what he did, he exterminated all these internationalists, all these Marxists. And we got this pyramid again.
Is that what you say?
And,
yeah.
Just to end the...
That will take another 15 to 20 minutes.
But
I ask you one thing, yeah?
Just to end my idea. And the second attempt to introduce democracy was in the 90s. It was our second victory. It was in August 91, when I participated in the fighting under the barricades around the White House, yeah, in Moscow. And it was a wonderful feeling. Now it's our victory, yeah. Now everything will be changed. And Russian population got this wonderful freedom to build a new house. We left the barracks. We were in prison. We lived in barracks. And now we could build any house we would like to build. Yeah? What did we build? The same barracks. We built the same barracks. Now the population of Russia is in the same barracks as before, and built it by themselves.
Would you say, because there's a narrative now rising, especially with former Soviet states, that call the way in which Russia deals, it says it's also a colonial power and it has colonized its own people. How do you look at that narrative? Do you agree with it, if you call them slaves?
The state colonized?
Yeah. Would you see Russia as a colonial power? Would that work for you?
You see, Alexander Herzen, yeah, it's one of my favorite writers in the 19th century. He formulated wonderfully, yeah, the Russian state occupied Russia as a foreign army. You see, these connections between the power and the populations, it was always like a foreign army. The main enemy of Russian population is its own state. I wouldn't say it's colonizing. Yeah, if we say colonizing, it's like remembers us a Great Britain Empire. Yeah. It has nothing to do with colonization of Great Britain Empire, who brought not only death to India or to other countries, but a little bit of culture. Yeah? But what happened in Russia, I would say it's genocide. It's not colonization, it's genocide. And it's repeating all the time. What is happening now? Yeah? In the state in Russia is making genocide against Russian population. In the last 2 years, yeah, hundreds and hundreds of young men were just sent to be killed. Why? Why? Because the Russian state is the main enemy of the Russian population.
I want to talk a bit about the present and maybe the future before we go to the questions of the audience. And maybe start because there was something I didn't realize, and you write very clearly in your book that Russia is also behind some of the Islamist terrorist attacks. And you write it as one example in the way that Russia destabilizes Europe. I don't think we're aware of this enough. How can you say something about it, and also about how Russia destabilizes Europe at this moment?
Russia was, I mean Russia. If we say now some words, we have to explain what we mean. If we say Russia, what do we mean? If we say Russians, who are Russians? If we say Russian culture, what is Russian culture? Yeah. So let's say the criminal regime. Yeah. Of course, the dictatorship can exist only through the intimidating its own population and through the war. Yeah. This state of the war, it's the life for the dictatorship. Yeah, and so the West didn't realize that the West is at war with the Russian Federation, but Russian Federation was always at war with the West. Yeah? And the idea to make the war now in the 21st century is not just to make the war with the nuclear weapons. It's just the idea of with a lot of money, with a lot of this dirty money, just to destabilize anything in the West. And so you remember, yeah, in the West, the leftists, the left parties, the right parties, they got money from Russia. Yeah?
Yeah.
For Russia, it didn't matter, are they left or are they right? They are
As
just
long as they
against
destabilize.
the state.
Yeah.
And so with any means. And of course, they were supporting all the terrorists. They are supporting terrorists now. No. You remember what happened on the 7th of October? Who was preparing this horrible deed, this horrible crime? Who helps the Palestinian terrorists?
It's a good question.
Russian Federation, of course, all these Wagner troops and so on and so on.
I want to speak also, I want to ask you something else that I was wondering about, because you write in your book that what will happen next probably is that Chechnya will leave Russia, you think. You thought. I wrote that Kadyrov is currently ill. What do you think that will happen if he dies?
I don't know what will happen if he dies. Another Kadyrov will come to power. You see, Kadyrov is just a function. Yeah, he's a functionary. It's the same thing. What will happen when Putin dies? Maybe he died. We never know. But then will be the next Putin. Yeah.
You don't think this will change and the people will eventually rise up again? And
Chechenian people
Yeah.
against Kadyrov? Maybe.
Or if he dies, or if Putin dies?
Just we don't know the details. We know the rules. We know the laws of history. And the main law of history of an empire is that the last empire in Europe is the Russian Federation. And it will decline. It will collapse. We don't know this year, in 5 years, in 10 years, but it's the law. Yeah, nobody could imagine that the Soviet Union would collapse. It happened. Now it's difficult to imagine that the Russian Federation will collapse. Yeah, it will happen. Yeah, we don't know when and why. But these national questions is not be lost because it's an empire. Chechenian is with Russia because it gets a lot of money from Moscow. When Moscow stops to give money, why need Chechenian Moscow? No need at all, because Chechnya is already an independent state. The laws of Russian Federation don't work there. Chechnya has its own army, and for them to declare them independent, it's just in 5 minutes, and they are independent state. And this will be, of course, the beginning of the domino effect.
How do you look at what's happening now in Georgia?
In Georgia, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. I remember when Saakashvili came to power in Georgia and started his reforms. It was something like miracle. Yeah, who was in the old Georgia could remember. Yeah, that it was absolutely corrupt country, corrupt state. Yeah, and he managed to correct this mistake. Yeah. And it was something like green light for all other countries of the former Soviet Union. Look, Georgians could do this, so maybe we could try, maybe we will succeed too. And it's tragedy that now Georgia is coming back to the Soviet Union again, and these pro-Russian parties, they introduce these pro-Russian laws again, and when people go to street to protest, they are
Beaten, yes.
beaten like in Belarus or like in Moscow. It hurts. It hurts.
And why did it happen? You think?
I would explain it in the following way. Look, I'm optimist. I'm a historical optimist. Look, 100,000 years ago, we all ate each other. And now the humankind is developing to a law state, to democracy, where the state is here to defend you, weak people, against the stronger people. So nobody could take anything from you because he is stronger. And that is why this is the law of development of the humankind. Yeah? All nations will come to democracy one day because democracy is just more convenient to live in. Why Russian oligarchs invested their money in London, not in Moscow? Because if you are oligarch in Moscow, today you have everything like Mikhail Khodorkovsky. Tomorrow you have nothing, you are in prison. And in London, it's private property. You are under the defense of the state, yeah? And so I think, just because it's more convenient to live under democracy, all nations will come to democracy one day. But historically, I don't know why, but some nations make a shortcut, and some nations go to democracy in circles, yeah? And so Russians and Georgians make these circles. Yeah, how long will they make these circles? Nobody knows. So I'm optimist, but I'm pessimist regarding the next years. Look, the best, I think, maybe the best Russian novel of all for all generations is Dead Souls by Gogol. Maybe somebody read this book. You remember wonderful lines, wonderful words about Russia, who is like Troika, flying into the bright future. But what was bright future for him? The 20th century. For us is this horrible past, the most bloody century of Russian history. Now, Gogol would compare Russia with our historical experience, not with the Troika flying in the future. He would compare Russia with a metro train in the tunnel going just in two directions. Here is the order, and here is the attempt to introduce democracy, or in Russia it means chaos and anarchy. And we have seen this train, so the whole country going with this train from in the 1917, from Tsarist Russia into the democracy of the February 1917, or in chaos of revolution. Then this train under Stalin came again back to the order. My generation went with this train to the introducing of democracy over these attempts, which ended in the chaos and anarchy in the 90s. And we see now this train coming back, has come back into the criminal dictatorship of Putin. So we can now imagine the next stations of this train,
Maybe two more questions before we go to the audience. And the first is, I do want to know, because you said earlier that in 1991, after the fall of the Soviet Union, the West you didn't say it in these words, but the West didn't show people how to do democracy, but they showed them how to do capitalism maybe, or at least how do you deal with your dirty money, and that everything is for sale. And I was wondering if you look at the current situation, because I think that's a very vital point, that Europe could have acted also differently to help the change into a democratic state. What do you think regarding Georgia, for example? Could the European Union or Europe as a whole could have done differently?
By the West?
Yes. What should they have done differently?
A lot of things.
Where to start?
A lot of things. First of all, the West must establish democracy in the West. Because democracy is not a state of paradise. Democracy is the possibility to fight for democracy. You see, by dictatorship, the population belongs to the power, and the population cannot influence the power. The power is over just like heaven there. That is why it's sacred, yeah? It could do with you anything, yeah? That is why we have, since generations, this Stockholm syndrome. We are, in Russia, hostages of the power, and so we start to love the Tsar. Maybe if he sees that we love him, he will not kill us. And democracy means that we can influence the power, because the power depends on us, because these presidents, they want to be re-elected next time. So they listen to the polls. And this is the instrument how to influence. I just want to maybe to make an example how it works. For years and for years, I tried to explain in Switzerland that we are not neutral. It's impossible to be neutral. We are at war. Olympic Games 2013. Yeah, I tried to organize the boycott. Look, you want to show solidarity with whom? With the criminal regime, or with the young, wonderful people who want to protest, who go to the streets to protest against the regime? Yeah? No, the best first European democracy built Schweitzer Hüsle, yeah? Swiss chalet in Sochi, and the president of Swiss Federation came personally to lick the boots of the dictator. The result, the next day after Olympic Games, this war started, the annexation of Crimea. 4 years passed, 2018. Football championship, soccer championship in Russia. The story repeats. I tried to organize boycott. For me, it's everything clear. 4 years of war in Europe, 1,000, 10,000 of dead people, of killed, of wounded, 100,000 of refugees. What should you explain more? Putin explained everything to the world.
He does everything
But
he says.
here is the moral things, and here fun to play football and billions of football money. All nations went to Russia to play football in front of Putin. He understood it absolutely in correct way. You support my aggression, you support my way. That was the point of no return. Yeah? The door to the invasion of 24 February 22 was open at that time. Yeah? And then we have the invasion, 24th of February. The first thing I hear, the president of Switzerland says, we are neutral, we will never support the sanctions against Russia. So for years, I tried to break this wall with my head. Yeah, what to do? Just try to break the wall further. Go on. On the 25th of February, I'm on the TV, the main political TV show in Switzerland, Arena, discussing what to do, the problem. I said everything I wanted to say. Dear Switzerland, the epoch of neutrality is over. Is over, yeah? And maybe this was just, in Russian we say, my 5 kopecks. Yeah? Because after that, the next day the president says, yes, we will support sanctions against Russia. That is how democracy works. You must influence the voters, the people, and the power. All these presidents, maybe they don't care about the war. They care about just to be elected next time. And that is why they will hear to the voters. Just don't give up. Just fight. That is democracy. Fighting for democracy is democracy, because we have this instrument.
Maybe a last question before we go to the audience, and that is in 2013, you already wrote a letter because you were invited to go to the letters in the book, and you were invited to go to a book fair in New York as a Russian writer, and you wrote, I can't go because I oppose so much to what the state is doing. I cannot be there under your wings.
I don't want to represent this
yes.
criminal regime.
That's what you said. Yeah, and
I
what
want
you
to
wrote.
represent my Russia, which is free of dictators. Yes.
And you said that you already knew when you wrote that what the effects were going to be. And I was wondering, as a writer, you see it as your plight to speak out, but what has it cost you and what has it brought you?
I have no Russia anymore.
No.
I'm a refugee now, you see. When I came to Switzerland, it was normal. It was normal that you live anywhere. I think as a writer, you must live everywhere. Yeah? In the 21st century, there are no borders anymore. But I didn't change, yeah, but my country changed a lot. So I didn't emigrate. My country emigrated from the 21st century into the Middle Ages. And I cannot go to Russia anymore. I lost my country. I'm an enemy. I'm a traitor. Traitor is worse than an enemy. And we are at war. And now the war is not where the front line is. In the 21st century, the war is everywhere. I get threats. I got an email from Germany in Russian. Shishkin предатель, смерть предателям. Shishkin is a traitor, death to traitors. What should I do? Should I give up? Should I stop? If I don't write, if I don't speak, if I don't fight, what is the sense of my life then?
And that is Pushkin, isn't it? Maybe to end with literature.
Okay,
For you.
it's difficult. It's another topic, Russian literature and Russian writers. Yeah, it's complicated. Invite me next time with my next book. I wrote now, it will be published now in Russian, my new book, Essays on Russian Literature. So my Pushkin, my Gogol, my Tolstoy, my Dostoevsky, my Chekhov. The view on Russian literature through this war. What was wrong? What happened? So just invite. I hope my Dutch publisher will publish this book and you will invite me. So
and we will talk
discuss
about
this
that later on.
Separately.
Is there anyone who wants to ask a question? Yeah, I see 2 hands. I'm going to run and get a microphone. Dankjewel. Ik begin bij u. U had het al aangekondigd.
Ja, hallo. U houdt hem vast, oké. Mijn naam is Julian Bakker. Ik heb het boek gelezen. I read the book in English, yes. I read the book from Jaap Scholte, Kameraad Baron. Very good book. I have listened to you carefully. I agree with almost everything you say, except I don't agree with what you say about 7 October, that was terrorists who were inspired by Russians with their attack. I don't agree with that, and I don't think that's supported. But with due respect, I'm saying that. I think that Mr. Putin is probably one of the worst war criminals ever, who ever lived in the world. I think it is terrible the way Navalny was killed. It's only not only Navalny, it's people thrown out of windows of hotels, as you know. So this regime is horrifying. But if we look at Mr. Zelensky, what has happened is, of course, we here in the West, we read primarily bad stories about Russia. There's not a bad word, nothing about Zelensky. I don't want to say anything bad about Zelensky, but if you look at from a Russian point of view, you know that much better. And you see a NATO coming, NATO is the North American treaty, and moving very close to Russia with the possibility of putting rockets or whatever military equipment at a few hundred kilometers from Moscow. If you look at how Mr. Zelensky has apparently badly treated the Russian population in Kiev, I wonder if I hope I'm not too long. If there's not some, if Mr. Zelensky could not have prevented, and the West also, this horrible war continuing and starting and continuing. And my final question is to you: how do we get out of this? Can you help us? Is there a way for a treaty, for a silence of Cesar Fuego?
Thank you very much for these very difficult questions. Yeah, how to get out from this catastrophe. Look, 2 years ago, it was a huge solidarity wave over the world. Yeah, I was talking in Zurich on the demonstration, of the manifestation in front of 40,000 people. It was impossible to imagine that the political demonstration would come 40,000 people in Zurich. Yeah? And I was very optimistic because I saw that all the nations, yeah, all the governments want to help Ukraine to defeat the Russian army. And for me, it was, I was so naive. So everybody who wants something good, we are naive, yeah. And I could not imagine that 2 years would pass, more than 2 years, yeah, and we will be in the war now, in this horrible situation. Zelensky was at the beginning of this war the great hero for the West, for Ukraine, for everybody, yeah, just fighting the aggression. What is now? Where is that wave of solidarity? We have no wave of solidarity at all. Look what is happening in Poland, for example, the country who helped Ukrainians most of all, yeah. Now the Polish farmers are yeah, fighting Ukrainians at the border, yeah.
Because of the grain.
And what we see now, yeah, Russia cannot, the Russian Federation, yeah, the regime cannot win, yeah, and they are ready for the peace negotiations, just to freeze the conflict, yeah, just to stop at this front line. The West doesn't want, the Western politicians, they don't want Ukraine to defeat Russian Federation, because this defeat, this military defeat, could cause the anarchy in Russia, in the country with the nuclear bombs, nuclear weapons. And this is the horror vision for everybody, yeah? The anarchy in Russia and losing control over the nuclear weapons. Yeah? That is the horror vision. That is why the West would make handshake with the next Putin, just who would promise to take control, yeah, and not to lose control over the nuclear weapons. And so the West doesn't want Ukraine to win. That is why they don't give enough weapons for the victory. And they are pressing, interested in status quo, exactly as the Kremlin is. And they are pressing Zelensky by not giving him enough weapons for fighting to stop the war, to make the peace negotiations, to freeze the conflict. And we have now the horrible situations. Everybody wants peace except Zelensky. Yeah? And I'm afraid they will press Zelensky till he would agree. If he would not agree, they will press the next who will come after Zelensky. Yeah? And they will press the like Russians. Yeah? So the West just helps the Ukrainian, but it's not enough, yeah, to win. And the Russians press the Ukrainian population by terrorizing them with these bombs, yeah, with rockets every day. You see, my city is Odessa. My mom was born in Odessa. My grandparents come from Odessa. And it hurts to see every night they send rockets to, they bomb Odessa. It hurts to see. And they will do it to the Ukrainian population till Ukrainians will be so tired with the war, so they would make another Maidan against Zelensky, just stop the war, we don't want to fight anymore. And Ukraine is a small country, so millions and millions left. They don't have enough soldiers, they don't have enough population. And Russia is huge, so it's just a matter of time. Yeah, it could be 1 year, 2 years, but one day Ukraine will have to be ready to the peace negotiations to freeze this conflict, how I see the future. Yeah? And Russia, you see, yeah, Russia is like a huge Titanic, it's drowning, but it's just so huge it could, it could go down for years and for years and for years. So I see the answering your questions. I'm very pessimistic in this situation. I see that they will, both sides, the West and Russia, will press Zelensky till he agrees to the freezing of the conflict, how it will end. So it will be actually catastrophe without end. And by the way, to the Palestinians, yeah, there are some problems, some international conflicts which have no solution, yeah, like Israel and Palestine. Every generation hopes, the world hopes, they will stop the war. But every generation has its own war, and every war, every new generation has a new war, and this war, every war is getting more and more horrible. And there is no solution to this conflict. So maybe after freezing this war, there will be no solution between Russia and Ukraine, between, who knows? Everybody wants that everything will be okay, but sorry, I don't have any optimistic answers to your question.
Yes, I had a question, but you answered this all partly now, because earlier you said Europe should help Ukraine killing the beast, and that's a thing that I like much more. I think we should help killing the beast. And don't you think that the idea of Timothy Snyder, that the Russian Federation would fall apart a little bit, would be very helpful, so that the imperial desires would stop and it gets a normal country? Is there any hope?
I write about this a lot in this book, because of course the falling apart would cause the wars, national wars in Russia, horrible conflicts, yeah. But without this falling apart, there is no hope for establishing democracy in Russia. Yeah? First, you have to kill the empire. After that, this is the condition. Maybe it will be possible to establish democracy. We have several conditions which are very important for establishing a normal society in Russia, yeah, nowadays. But no one of these conditions is possible to fulfill. The first condition is the total defeat of Russian Federation in this war. Who will defeat? Ukraine cannot defeat Russian army without weapons. Yeah? The recognition of national guilt. The next Russian Tsar should come to Kiev and fall on the knees, like German Chancellor in Warsaw. And not only in Kiev, in all countries where Russian tanks were, in Prague and Budapest and Tbilisi and Vilnius. The next Tsar will never do this. If he falls on the knees, he is not a real Tsar. Yeah? Nuremberg trials against the war criminals. They were organized by American army in Germany. Who will organize Nuremberg trials in Russia against war criminals? War criminals themselves, they will put themselves into prison. Who will organize the free election? Kadyrov will organize free election. Who will win these free elections? Wonderful people from Russian opposition like Mikhail Khodorkovsky or Garry Kasparov will come to Moscow and say, people, let's build democracy. You see, it worked 40 years ago. Now people would tell them, no, we had already democracy. We know what is this. Yeah, go back. We need order. Or Strelkov-Girkin, who killed Ukrainians, and he is now in prison, yeah, because he was very unhappy with the way of the war. Yeah, so he criticized Putin, yeah, because it was false war and not real war. Girkin will tell people, yeah, on these free elections, let's make Russia great again. It's humiliation what the West does with us. I promise you the order, we will be great again. The guy will win the most free elections. Yeah? For introducing democracy, we need citizens. We need some percent of population who understand what democracy is, how it works. Yeah? Millions and millions of potential citizens of the future bright Russia, they left Russian Federation in the last 30 years, millions and millions. The most educated people, the most people who can do really something. And they left Russia because they saw no future for them, for their families. And they built bright future now in America, in Israel, in Holland, in Switzerland, everywhere, but not in Russia. So all these conditions which we need to build a democratic society, they are not present. The last thing may, okay.
Would there be a possibility that Russia has no imperial desires anymore? Because I'm not so much focused on democracy in Russia, but I'm focused on safety in Europe and for all of us. And when that means there is a Tsar in Russia, okay, let there be a Tsar. But it could be a smaller.
We had the same in the 20s, yeah. Everybody was very unhappy with Bolsheviks in Russia, but they have their Stalin. Okay, we will make handshake with Stalin. Yeah. So the West will be happy with the next Putin. Just be there behind the wall, yeah. Yes, this is the tragedy of Russian people. This is the most, you see.
I have room, I think, for 2 more questions.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
Thank you. I think, first, thank you very much for this lecture. It was very interesting. That's the first thing. But what you say, I think, is correct. Looking how to break the circle, you must learn from history. And if you look at the history during the late 20s and the 30s in Germany and in Japan, they were also in some sort of circle. Weimar Republic was very unstable. Then you have the Third Reich. In Japan, you have the Imperial Army. What happens is, and that's the point I think where we must be very honest with each other, Germany paid a very huge price eventually. The Allies paid a very huge price because we waited too long as allies to intervene. I think what happens now is the same. If the longer we wait, we want to have peace negotiations, we think we can keep the peace, we have some peace in the east. This we know eventually will not work. Eventually, we will recognize that we will pay a very, very high price. And unfortunately, I think also the Russian people. But what happens is then the question, if eventually we realize this, and we do the same as what we have done in Germany, in Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, occupied Russia, give them this humiliation, but at the same time help them with everything, like we have done with Germany and we've done with Japan. In where we must also have, have patience as well, but you see that these both countries are now very normal, very good democratic countries. So the question is, should we also do this path the same with Russia? But the price will be, of course, very huge, and we must be very honest for both sides that the price will be very huge.
It was very difficult for me to understand. Could you just in 2 sentences to say
Yes.
what was the question? Excuse me.
In Nazi Germany,
Yes.
I'm going to rephrase it a bit. In Nazi Germany, of course, at some point, the UK and other countries said this no more, and we went to war, basically. And the same happened in Japan, if I'm saying that correctly. And the humiliation that brought to Japan and Nazi Germany, that was enough, maybe, so that the fact that they were humiliated, to build a nation after that. Is that what we have to do, not with Russian as well, if you're being completely honest? Go to war.
To humiliate
Them.
Russia
Yes. Yes. And to build it up
for
again.
the
Maybe to
building
destroy it
the
and
new
build it up
Russia.
again. And then I have a last question over here.
You can not humiliate Russia more than Putin does. Yeah, that's the huge humiliation of their own. It's genocide. Yeah, it's pure genocide what is happening in Russia. Yeah, but the problem is people don't understand this. That's the main problem for them. They think they are defending their home country against enemies. You see, they identify themselves with the tribe. They have just tribal consciousness from the past. We live in the 21st century. Yeah, we decide. We have the answer, only we, to the main question: what is good, what is evil? And if I think that my country, my people, do evil, I will be against my country, against my people. But they live in the past. They have this tribal consciousness. Our tribe, we Russians, are always good. They are enemies, other tribes. They want to kill us. And we don't have any responsibility for anything. Our chief has responsibility for everything. Yeah, it's like my father. My father went to the war, to the Second World War, to defend his home country, his motherland. He was defending the regime which killed his father, my grandfather. And after the war, he was so proud. It was our victory. What did he get? What did the population get from this victory? No, they were the same slaves as before. Yeah? But he identified himself with this wonderful feeling of victory. We liberated Europe from fascism. We are good. Yeah? It was impossible to explain to him, you didn't liberate Europe from fascism. We brought another fascism to Europe. You are fascists. No, we are Russians. They are fascists. We are good. You see, how could you explain to these people that they are fascists, that they are evil? That's the problem.
I think there's a lot more questions that people would like to ask you, but I was looking at the time and I'm going to...
But we need
if
to
that's
say
okay.
something optimistic at the end.
But for me, you don't.
Anybody?
But it can only be optimistic.
Only optimistic. So. I'll make microphone.
He doesn't want it.
But for
February 2022, since that date, how did you participate in helping Ukrainians to win the war?
I'm doing what I can do. I was speaking, I was writing, I was helping. Also, Ukrainian family lived with us. We help Ukrainians living in our village and different villages. I write on my essays. I publish my essays all around the world, explaining to people why we should help Ukraine. So I do my best. Maybe it's not enough, but I do what I can. Yeah, and first of all, just maybe it will be not so optimistical, but to answering your questions. Yeah, I try to save dignity of Russian literature, because when the war starts, literature is always loser. All books I wrote and published in the last 20, 30 years, books written, published by my colleagues, could they prevent this catastrophe? No. Yeah. Literature is always loser when the war starts. Great German literature couldn't prevent Auschwitz. Great Russian literature couldn't prevent Gulag. But why we need literature? Why we need the dignity of the culture? Because one day, so during the war we need cannons, not literature. But one day the war will be over. Maybe it will be not tomorrow, maybe it will be in 1 year, maybe it will be 5 or 10 years, but the war will be over. And this gap between Russians and Ukrainians will be so deep, full with blood, hate, death. And with every day, this gap is getting deeper and deeper, more and more blood. But one day, the war will be over. And we will need the bridge over this gap. Maybe not our generation, maybe the next generations, or over next generations. But who will build this bridge? People of culture, writers, musicians, artists. That is why we have to save the dignity of culture, of Russian culture now, for that future bridge. Thank you very much. So.
Thank you very much for being here. And hopefully you'll be here around for if people want to drink a glass of wine.
Drinking glass of wine, I'm with you.
Thank you very much.